Okay. All right, let's start. So today we're in the zone of Italian. I don't know if anyone wonder why we did German songs, French songs, and then now we do Italian arias, but not Italian songs. Anyone wonder why? Anyone? Oh, we are here. Any idea why we don't do Italian songs but we Italian arias? Ooh.
No.
Someone is saying Italian is easy. Well, because for the Italian language, the opera is the main genre for the Italian language. When we do German songs, when we talk about German vocal music, German lieder is the very significant area of music. Of course, we have German arias too, right? Crowd, by Wagner, by Weber. We also have arias by French composers. But in general, when we talk about operas, majority of the operas are Italian. Okay, we also, as I said, do have German, French. We have also Czech operas, Russian operas, and things like that. But majority of it is Italian. And so when we are thinking about being an opera singer, being someone who is involved in singing operatic music, we then have to think about the Italian language. Okay, and Italian language is a very special language. With the reason I'll tell you in a little bit. I noticed one thing when I look at titles of the pieces. So, for instance, the first piece is by Bellini, or Quante Volte. When we type in titles of your songs or your arias, make sure you follow the capitalization of the language. Don't follow the capitalization of English. Okay? For English, you would capital everything, Q and B. But in Italian, you don't capitalize that unless it's a name. Okay, then you capitalize. Okay. Just like every other arias. This is Mabel's aria. Okay, you write it this way. Don't capitalize those letters, okay, like you will in English. And of course, in English, you capitalize all the first letters of the words except for prepositions like off or something. If you say the marriage of Figaro, you won't capitalize o off, right? So it's the same here. And for German, this is important because when you're writing your programs or whatever. In German, capitalization only falls on nouns. Okay, German use capital letters for nouns. So this is a song by Strauss. Sprache meiner Minna. Minna is a noun. That's why it's capitalized. When you write it in the program, don't capitalize all these because then they'll be like nouns, okay, but they're not nouns. So follow the capitalization of the language, right? Okay. So we have touched German, we have touched French. Today we talk about Italian. Now Italian is very special. It comes from Latin. Okay, so we have Italian, we have French, we have Spanish, and other smaller ones. But they all come from Latin. And what is special about Italian is that Italian has preserved one very fundamental quality from Latin, okay, which is consonant length. So the length of the consonant, whether it is long or whether it is short. French doesn't have that. Spanish doesn't have that either. Okay. French went the opposite way. Okay. French eliminate all those N's at the end of the word, R at the end of the word, and change them into vowels, and eventually somehow having nasal vowels. Okay. That is French. But Italian preserved consonant lengths. So why is this thing significant? This thing is very important because when we talk about consonant length, the important thing is length. What does that mean? Length means that something takes time if it is long, okay, and something takes less time if it is short. And in music, we have the notes written for specific note values, which require specific time. Okay, so when we have length, it means that every time we sing, we need to know how to negotiate the length. I think I've talked to most of you, if not all, about German when it has long or short vowels and how we actually negotiate with the consonant and vowels in a note. So, for instance, you have, let's say you have a crotchet. You have a crotchet. A crotchet is that long. Okay, you cannot stretch that. You cannot make it shorter. That is the length you have. But if you have a double consonant, like the word mamma in Italian, which means mother, you have a long M in the middle, which means the long M needs to have a length, needs to take up some time. But you only have this length for your crotchet. So the M will naturally take up some time. So your singing might sound like mama. So your vowel might just take a quaver, right? Of course, relative according to the speed of the music. But when it is long, it needs some time for you to sing the consonant, and hence your vowel will be shorter. If this is another word, mama with one M, which means he or she loves me. This is a short M, which means that it doesn't take a length. So you can sing the full length for the first syllable. Mama. Okay. Whereas this one has length. Mama. Right? Understand? Same thing, but just a different example. Nona and nonna. Okay. Ninth. So you say I know the ninth of Beethoven. You say you know the ninth symphony of Beethoven from Scola No. wrong, you say, conozco la nonna di Beethoven, then you are saying, I know Beethoven's grandmother. Okay? Grandma. So, consonant length is the fundamental important thing in Italian, which changes meanings. And it's the significant thing in language that we need to preserve when we sing. Go back to a week ago, we talked about French. We talked about how important the color of the vowels are in French, because that is the important feature of the language that we have to preserve when we sing. Because in French, if you say the vowel wrong, you change the meaning of the word. Okay, so that is the important thing in French. In Italian, the length of the consonants. So that this concept applies to all the double consonants that you say. Okay, which means that every time you have a double consonant, you know that that note will need some care. Okay, we need some care because we need to negotiate how long you sing the vowels, how long you sing the consonants. Okay. So then that brings us to what I call the different articulations in Italian language. Because we have long consonants and at the same time we have different types of consonants. Okay. So in essence, we're actually creating different articulations when we're singing in Italian. So and then we have and so right. So all these okay. I don't want to go into technical terms. All these consonants are made by stopping the air when you are singing in the long version now. If you do chi, you do ta, so the chi, so you're actually stopping on chi, or ba, or ka, right? So these are the stop consonants, okay, or the stops. They also include, if you know IPA, this kind of what we call the Africans, ch, so, okay, so if you have DCIA, that will be a double ch, so sha, right? Sha, and it's also stopped. Whenever we have stops, we create the articulation of a staccato. Okay. Tu, to, pa, ka, okay, those kind of things. We created an articulation of a staccato. This one we create. It's actually that, but you can also think of it somewhat like a staccato. It's not really a staccato. This one is what we call a martellato. It's kind of like that kind of sound. So mama, mama. So you have this kind of sound where you make the long consonant, but the long consonant is sung throughout. Asta. It's sung throughout. So you have this kind of consonant. The other one is when you don't have long consonants. Okay. Mama, nona, that is said before. You create a tenuto. So you have mama, nona. Okay. That actually helps you a lot because in Italian we have a lot of words that will tend to sing without the right consonant length. Okay. Take the word amore or dolore. Sometimes when we sing, we tend to sing things like amore, which is wrong because you're creating a long M, or dolore is actually the right length. Okay. So when we go into music, we'll then be able to see how this actually applies to that. And this all seems like very, very technical, but when you apply it to music, you'll see that it's actually the tools that singers actually use when they are singing for expression. And I wish we can have like an extra session, maybe in the future, where we meet for session and analyze recordings, analyze the recording of Arias and see what she does in different areas, all those things. I think that would be something quite nice. But today we'll look at the music that we have in front of us. Okay, what about Zach? Yeah, Zach takes this sound to this sound. So this is azione. Z takes this sound, which is s. Okay, that's why you say senza, not senza, right? And when Z, this one is also important. When Z is between vowels, although it is written as one, as single, it is still long. Okay, that is the only one exception. That's why thank you in Italian is grazie. Grazie. So you have a staccato effect, grazie, not grazie. So you don't hear Italian say grazie. Okay? Grazie. So this is actually long. Azione. Okay? That is the Z sound. Or do you mean the Z IP? No. Double Z. If double Z is the same thing. The word for blue, azzurro. It's still long. Okay. But in Italian you have either the voiced or unvoiced version for that. That one is inconsistent in Italian, and you will only know when you search a dictionary or something. Azzurro is actually azzurro. Azzurro. Okay. This one is voiced, but notice it's not. Actually, you can see better this way. Actually, it's not azzurro. Okay, it's not azzurro. It's azzurro. It has a combination of the T and the Z. Yes. Martella. This one is when the consonant is short. This one is when the consonant is long. This one is those consonants that are long, that are stung. They can actually hold throughout, like L, M, N, R, or S. Yeah. So if you have only single consonants, then you have the neutral effects here. Ma, no, na, okay, which actually makes the consonant short. So so this is important. The difference between a long consonant and a short consonant is clear in Italian. There is no like middle ground consonant lengths. Okay. So when you say amore, it's either amore or amore. There is no amore that is like in the middle. Okay. In English, we tend to do consonants like in the middle because it's just not part of the language that we differentiate the length of the consonants. But in Italian, this is important. Okay. We'll go into it. Why is this important now? Because a lot of what we hear in recordings that we think oh, this is so expressive, or this is so much emotion. A lot of times, those singers are actually using the language for expression, and for us who don't know Italian to want to do something to express, we need to know what tools we can use. Okay, and that's why this is important. I have but it's fine. I'll show you later if we have time. But we can start with looking at music, and you have the folder, so you can also refer to the score and see what actually happens when we apply all these into the music. Okay. Right. So okay, so the first three that we have, well, actually two now because Nico's not here, are from what we call the bel canto era. The bel canto era is what we generally call the repertoire of the period of these three composers: Rossini, Donizetti, and Bellini. Okay. We call these music the bel canto genre. And of course, bel canto is also used to mean different things. It is also used to mean a particular vocal technique, which is the vocal technique that we all use, the classical singing technique. Some people just call it bel canto in general. But the bel canto that we are using now is talking about this genre of music of Bellini, Donizetti, and Rossini. And I touched upon this last week, just very briefly, about how in the canto era, the voice is the main thing. The voice is the main star of the music, and that is why you find in the canto repertoire all the important arias are accompanied by very simple accompaniment. Okay. You have things like you have things that you have one that Mabel is going to sing, which is called Quel Guardo il Cavaliere. The accompaniment goes okay, and then we have one that Joseph is singing. We have one that Elisa is singing. For what? Okay. What else do you have? You have arias like Formezzo, Non più mesta. Non più mesta. That you also have slow arias like Casca Diva. There is another soprano aria from the from an opera by Donizetti. Okay. You need to know the tune, otherwise it's just like everything is just simple accompaniment. So, and in this era, how the voice actually shines is a very important feature in the repertoire. So you always have very simple accompaniments in the orchestra, so that the voice can just be its own thing. It can do whatever, can sing loud or soft, and not worry about balance or whatever. Yeah, there's even an aria that is accompanied by the harp, right? Una furtiva lagrima. So only accompanied by harp, and O quante volte is also accompanied by harp. So imagine how loud the harp can be in the orchestra. Not very loud. So it creates two things. One is that the voice is very free, and the voice is the star, and you can express everything that you want to express. But the downside is that the singers are actually very naked on stage, right? Because you have no support. You feel like, oh, I'm just me, myself. So yeah, let's listen to two of these examples. Benigno quante volte. What is it talking about?
So Romeo and Juliet similar story.
Mm-hmm.
So Julieta is dressing in wedding gown, pretty dresses, not knowing that who is she going to marry, someone she didn't like, and she already have someone up, which is Romeo,
Mm-hmm.
and she was waiting for Romeo, where you.
Mm-hmm. What happened before this, or why she do this?
What? She already met Romeo, and she knows that Romeo is from another family, which is 敌对的
The enemy of
enemy of her own family. So they have like 100 years of hatred towards each other.
yeah.
And she knows that it's impossible for them.
So when you sing an aria, you always have to know. You always have to know this fact. Virtually all arias are moments in operas that are moments in opera when time stops. Okay, so when time goes on, we have all the plots, and so we have all the recitati or whatever. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And then it's like time stops, and then you sing an aria. Okay, that is why people will make this kind of joke, like, how come Violetta can still sing so long when she is supposed to die? When she's dying. Arias work this way, so it's kind of like a time stop at a certain moment, and then what you hear is what the character wants to say, wants to pray, whatever. Okay, so we have O quante volte. We just start from O quante volte. Yeah, skip the first few pages. We're not doing that. We're starting from the aria, which is page 17. also very difficult. Yeah. Every time you look at a bel canto repertoire and you see that the accompaniment goes, you know that this is a hard piece to sing. Okay. So for instance, the first line itself already requires a very refined singing of your voice. Oh, wonderful day of wonder. One thing that I also want to point out here is while we have what we call a very lyrical line going on, the language is still there. Okay. Let's just do this line. Con quale ardor t'attendo. Con quale, this is measured in 3. Con quale ardor, so you have the R's, t'attendo, and then you have a T, a double T on t'attendo, right? So naturally, that E flat, you will treat that as a staccato. Okay? Quale ardor t'attendo. If you don't do that, you will sound like ardor t'attendo, and you lose the text. Okay? Con quale. The staccato is for you to be clear with the text, not for you to take a breath. Okay? Not or t'attendo. If you want to take a breath before t'attendo, but keep that. Okay? So that N is also very important. Yeah. And especially when you see dotted rhythm, usually the dots are for the long consonants. Gan, no. I believe it is. So usually it means that this is the N. Gano. Yeah, for a dotted rhythm. Gano. So that's where the language comes. Great. So this is a good example of a control Arias, and we can see that how important it is to be able to really sustain your voice through all these melody that you're singing. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Now we have another one. This is come parli del solo from Donizetti. And so this name is also interesting. Donizetti. The Z is between two vowels, but it's single. Okay, but we talked about that Z in Italian are actually long. So it's actually Donizetti. Donizetti. It's not Donizetti. Donizetti. Okay. Right, Joseph, what is this talking about?
So this is the area for Corey. And then actually he just go into Adina village and then just post about how handsome he is, and every girl is admiring me. So he just talk about how he
Valkyrie, and when Valkyrie comes in to the opera, you know that that's his character. Okay. Great. Yeah, let's do it. What did you do at the end? Madre, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Make sure that we hear the run. Okay. Few things to talk about. Okay. So from the first one and also this one, you can actually see that sometimes you get this what we call the cadenzas, where the voice sings and then nothing is going on underneath the orchestra. And you find it a lot in the control Arias. So every time we have those kind of moments, those are the moments, like you say, for the singer to take charge and to be the star. And you have a few kind of moments where you have this. One thing I want to suggest, because that also ties to the use of text in your section. Oh, yeah, that can be a very seductive kind of kind of gesture, and also because you're also using the text. So you see there's so many demi-semiquavers, right? The last demi-semiquaver will be very long because of the double T. So you can do something like
that's your expression right there. Okay. Good. So that there's that. Are you going to do the high F for the end? Yeah, at the end. Yeah. Normally people do that one because of what the parade is. It's a show off, you know. So naturally you have this kind of showing off kind of things in the aria. Things like all those running notes, like for you to show off, right? The last one. Try to not think of singing E as fin. Try to sing something like eh. Yeah. So you are actually singing something like yeah. Just try that from the Don't follow that. Don't follow the text. Okay. Madre, then you say del amor. Okay. At this time, when composers write all this, especially towards the end of the operas, cadenzas, they just simply run because all the singers that sing will have their own cadenzas. Okay. So that's why you find things like Madre del Amor. Okay. It's not the right text there anyway. Singers always have their own ways of doing cadenzas. Like how we'll also talk about from way before the canto, which is Handel and Mozart or Handel, basically. That we'll do later. But yeah, this kind of places, don't try and make sure that you follow every single thing that the composer writes at the end of it. So it is completely fine to also wait until the chord finish to do the notes. Sometimes people do after this. Whatever, you know, they do extended stuff. So you can explore that. And the whole idea is just bel canto. The singer is the character, but the character is also a singer. So when we go to very small, we'll find that the singer is no longer we no longer see the person as a singer on stage. We see the person as a person as maybe as Violetta, you know, on stage. But in the bel canto era, we still see the person as a singer. So we can do a lot of singer kind of tricks and stuff. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, if you notice, I told Joseph to sing Fen la Madre, not Fin la Madre. You might wonder why, because in Italian we have 5 vowels, right? A, E, I, O, U. And didn't we say that? Well, I didn't say it, but we always heard that Italian vowels are pure. Okay, Italian vowels are pure and clear. Well, pure is because it doesn't have any diphthongs. So it's air, it's L, it's not A,
very flexible. Especially in singing, because of this school that most of you might have heard, the chiaroscuro. The chiaroscuro is a concept of vocal production. Chiaroscuro is a concept of voice production which balances between the chiaro and the scuro part of the voice. So the goal is to achieve a balanced voice, which is not too chiaro, which is too bright. So it is not and it's also not too scuro, which is dark, which is So you're achieving that kind of middle ground, a very balanced voice. Now the problem with singing is that we have what we call the singer's formant. Okay, this one is a term that if you read any vocal pedagogy books, you will find. Singer's formant is a particular frequency of overtone. So you know every note that we hear or play on an instrument has overtones. Okay, like this one, you only hear this note because this is the loudest fundamental note, but it actually has a frequency, has an overtone. So if I press this lightly, and then I press an octave higher, this note actually sounds that octave higher because that octave higher is the first frequency. And the second frequency is an octave and a fifth above. That is the middle C down and press it. Say it's sounding that. So every tone that we produce have different overtones. And what is special about the human voice is that at a very ideal singing tone, when everything is very balanced, you create an extra overtone that is very loud. Okay? You don't hear that specifically when you hear human voices because that overtone is actually very high. But what makes it clear is that the singer can actually sing over a full orchestra and still be heard, and that's how the human voice actually works. So that because of singer's formants, the voice can travel. So why did I tell you about that? Is because when the human voice is singing, it produces a lot of overtones, okay, including the singer's form. And so the vowel sounds that we hear are actually somewhat distorted or somewhat blended. Blended is actually a better word. Okay, so if you've been to at the diction class, you might have seen a chart. You might have seen a chart like this that shows You might see a chart like that, which is called a vowel chart, and then you have the what you call the front vowel, the back vowel, I think this is A and then the O and then open, whatever. Okay, the specific vowels is not the point. The point is when you are speaking, if you're thinking of saying the vowel A, okay. When you say A, we'll hear maybe this area of vowels, okay, which is a very specific area. Okay, so I said A, you hear that. But in singing, if I sing, you might hear this area of vowels. So you are hearing a bigger area of possible vowels. So because of this, And this happens because of all the overtones and all those things. And because of this, you don't actually need to think a particular specific vowel when you're singing, especially when you're going up to a higher tessitura, like just now that one. You can sing ben, and at that range you will be heard as E. Okay, understand? So this is a very important concept for you because it actually shows that in singing, it actually shows how we actually bridge the gap between learning the pronunciation of the words and singing. Okay, so when you have an E vowel on a high E for a baritone is pretty high, so you need to know how to adjust to it. Okay, great. All right, let's move on. We have two Arias from the Baroque era, which is Handel. I purposefully make it this way so that we don't always just start from the old times and then come to modern time. Okay, so you go back to earlier to Baroque times. We know that in the Baroque era, a lot of things is about elegance and about beauty. Even if you look at architecture from the Baroque, not from the Baroque era, you see that all those sculpture with very nice edges, very fine kind of details that you see there. So in Baroque music, you also find those details in vocal music. And what you usually find, because it is still very early on in the history of opera development, you find very clear recitative and aria structure. Okay, same with Mozart's opera. You have recitative, they're all quarreling, they all do whatever, and then you have an aria, and then you have recitative, and then you have a duet, and recitative, you have the finale of the act or something. So it all follows this kind of structure, right? But one thing that Handel has that Mozart doesn't is its da capo nature of all the arias. The arias usually go A, B, A, and the A section is actually the repeated da capo A section. And what usually happens in the da capo section is singers actually add ornamentation. They add ornamentation, they change some melodies, change some rhythms. Again, in order to show what the singer actually has in terms of facility, or whether it's running notes, whether it is a particular high note, you know. This thing is also very similar when you go to Rossini, and in Rossini's arias, singers actually have freedom, especially in the cadenzas when they just add, they write their own cadenzas to include, for instance, a high B for mezzo, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, so in Handel we have what we call the da capo aria pattern, and let's listen to what's the first one? Verdi Prati. Okay, let's listen to Verdi Prati. This one is not really properly da capo, but it has that kind of structures. Usually what you see on the score is first section, and then you see fine, not fine, female. when I was little, I see this word at the end of the first section. I always say fine. Okay, but it's actually not. It's an Italian word that means the end. You have the first section, and then you have fine, and then you have the second section, and at the end of the second section, you see the couples. Okay, you see the couple, and you go back to the first section, and then you finish the piece at fine. Okay, how it usually is. So let's listen to the okay, what is this about?
Moving of the island. And then we start by Gabriel for night. And he knew the island is desert and full of monsters. And he feels shocked. And then he feels like he to reach the beautiful island and he started singing.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done the whole opera before, so I know it's when you go back to Baroque era, all those stories are just very weird. You know, yeah, it's about this island that is controlled by a queen called Alcina, which is the title of the opera. And then she basically everyone has to follow her will. If not, she will turn you into a rock, turn you into a stone, or whatever, those kind of things. And and this one is actually a very romantic moment, very happy. Okay. So a lot of times you have the couples, and then what you always find in the Handel aria is a sort of moment at the end of the singer's part, at the first section also and the second
you'll find some sort of slower tempo. Sometimes it's written up saying adagio or whatever. That the singers will actually do a sort of cadenza. Okay, it's kind of like what we just did, right? If you look at the very end, what is written is just like that, and then she did something different from that. She did. So it is completely acceptable and also preferable in Handel's arias to have this kind of moments, okay, at the end of the sections. Okay? And when you have a proper da capo aria, usually when you come back to the first section, you will do some embellishment, as I said. But this one is not really a da capo aria, although the section is quite clear in the aria also. Okay. Another Handel aria. Some is a fast aria. Speed like check. Okay, what is this about?
So it's from the opera Berenice. So it's about
Berenice.
Berenice. So she's the queen of Egypt, and basically the person who sings this aria is the Betrothed. So basically the Berenice is the queen, and she loves the Betrothed, but he doesn't like her back, so he likes her sister instead. And basically, he's plotting to overthrow Berenice and let her sister take over the throne. So in Act 2, then Berenice accidentally finds out about this plot, and then basically she throws Richo in jail. And this is basically when he is caught in front of Berenice, then he basically sings this aria where it's like love will conquer all, but so it's like he's singing that he won't relinquish because of love.
So is he? What kind of emotion is he in this aria? Is he angry? Is he being a bit sad?
Very confident.
Yeah.
Not really sad.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can actually hear that in the music as well. Very full orchestra kind of motives, and it begins with single line from the violin. Okay, it doesn't begin. It begins one single line from the violin. So you can imagine when the orchestra plays this, it's actually very clear when you start. Just all the violins on the high note. Then you hear everything else. Okay, cool. Good. Yeah, it's not a lot of running nose sort of things. Uh, yeah, it's always tricky. Handle when you find fast handle Arias, you always find all these, right? At the end, Logan actually did something. Was that improvised? No, no, no. Yeah, so someone might sing something like um, you might also end with a higher octave also. So that is the kind of section that I'm talking about, the adagio section where you do embellishments. Yeah. So let's just look at the first line and see, because C, try, check B, you have a double P, so that G is actually some sort of a staccato effect. C, try, check B, C, try, check B, right? So it's not C,
Right. So you have that because of that. And you did that very well too. Yeah. Good. One thing that we also always do in Handle is, well, not always, but usually people do that is at the end of the first section, first time, you don't actually pause at the end. So before the B section, right, the orchestra is actually going in tempo. Yeah, so it's usually just carry on without the pause. Good, thank you.
So I have a question. Like handle, there have a lot of the rhyming. Is it can pause? I mean, take a breath in the middle, or just you have to have a shot.
Yeah, so in Handle you find sometimes very long embellishments that you just have to find a way to do that in tempo. In tempo is the key because it is still performed by the orchestra. Although it is a small orchestra, but they're still doing that in tempo. There is no time taking like how you would take time in the aria, for instance. Yeah. Of course, except the last adagio section. But other than that, everything has been in tempo. Sometimes what people do is you find an appropriate place to breathe, but if you really need to take that breath, then you probably cut one of the notes out, and just make sure to make sure that you can join back in time. Yeah. Some of those are very tricky, but usually Handel is pretty good in writing for voice. But of course, when Handel wrote for people, it's very good singers now, and also at that time you have what we call the castratis. So they are they're very important people in the building of Baroque music because a lot of the music are written for that. Castratis are male singers that were castrated when they were young, so they don't go through the process of the voice change, but their body grows as an adult, so the voice becomes very powerful, and a lot of times they have very wide range. Some even says it is up to 3 octaves or whatever, but we don't really get to hear them now. If you know there is a movie that is called Castrati, so it's about the very famous Castrati of Farinelli during that time. But we don't really hear them now. The only person we have left, who is called the last castrati that we hear in recordings, is someone called Alessandro Moreschi, I think, something like that. But yeah, if you go and search that, and also type castrati, you will find something like AM is the initial. Alessandro Moreschi, I think, but yeah, it's early 1900s where we just invented the recording equipment. We actually hear his voice recorded in. Yeah, so a lot of times you find repertoires that are very difficult, especially for the mezzos, because those are the range that a mezzo will sing nowadays. Countertenors will also sing that, but a lot of times countertenors will find those very hard to sing because of the difficult range, and also jumping here and there, up and down, those kind of things. So yeah, so that's Handel. And if you notice, it is clear in this last
we have very clear, sort of continual and 2D sections in handle music. So continual is the harpsichord. Harpsichord always plays with the orchestra during that time because the orchestra is small. And continual is usually the harpsichord and the cello only. Okay, and that's also the combination that we play in recitatives when in operas. And then the whole orchestra has 2 pieces. In Arias, you always find very clear sections of continual and 2 pieces. So if you look at the score, right, it's not shown very clear, but some of the scores are shown very clear where the 2 pieces are, where the continuals are. 2 pieces are written with big notes, like the regular size notes, where the continual notes are written very small. This is not an example. Okay? Only Baron writer does that. So the whole orchestra plays until when the singer comes in. And then you might have just a continual thing. And then to the so what you're really hearing is a big contrast like that. So if you can find those scores, Baron writer usually does that. Yeah. So when you see the small notes, those are actually for continual. The real big notes are the notes played by the orchestra. So if you have that, then you can ask your pianist to make that difference between that. Yeah. And always when the tutti plays, it's a big sound. Yeah. Great. So yeah, so let's take a break before we come back with 2 very small arias and a parody aria. Yeah, and then we will talk more about aria singing and Italian in general. There are other things that we can talk. Okay, time is it. Come back at 8:30.
imagine the last customer. Oh, oh, interesting.
I thought I should watch it at the time, but I was very 2018. So I saw the booklet.
Mm,
So
mm.
therefore, manuals, sopranos.
Yeah.
You know, there's no
Yeah, of course.
the story really tough.
Yeah. You know, the time. I mean, imagine you're still so young,
Yeah,
and then
really tough.
and then people already decide the life for you,
Yeah, but most of them also because they're poor.
right?
It's like our circus nowadays, actually China circus, all the kids very talented.
Right.
Actually, yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I thought you were saying farm.
Finally.
The largest in the world so far. Because last time when we won, it's 8.9. Yeah, I think so.
12.9.
Yeah. Because last time it started with 18.
Right.
And it took really forever. Then it got 10 inch. It's still like,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's somehow I left and looking at the store.
Yeah.
So in the end, I don't know.
But they want to speak to it. It's just those people. The size is bigger. The speed is the same.
But then when you flip, you might slower. So you have to remember to feel fast. So this is all quite funny, you know. 我买的时候是有discount 的，是可能
This is the how so impressed.
那些还没有打，所以是炒
我
卖
的
的。
不打
打给我，他就是不买，
打给嘛。
就好像我那个打给就。
First 我刚刚买的时候，我就那时候在美国，然后我们就做 Christmas party，然后就用这个开，就 like background music 这样。那时候 just 买，然后我就放在那边开 Spotify，就开整个晚上，90多，开完了。
你真的有在买？
因为我 charge 咩？
那你买便宜哦。
要有个什么
真的他们出。
tax 吗？
我那一个就是没有穿这个，可是是这样。
啊？ before we move on to the next few pieces, I want to tell you about two features that you always find in Italian. Okay. You know, in Italian, the stresses are always not the last syllable. Okay, unless you see an accent. So if you have that, then it's farò. So that is stress. Okay. If you I'm gonna use mama again. Two syllable. It won't be the last syllable. So it's mama. Okay. But if you see three syllable words, if you see three syllable words, unless you know the language, you won't know where the stress is. This word is leader. So stress on leader. But this one is manina. Okay. So when you see three syllable words, you don't really know where the stress is. And sometimes you'll find words that ends with two vowels. Ghiaccia. Okay, ghiaccia. Everything one. But you won't find the stress on the last syllable. So sometimes you find words like the ends this way. This is pharmacy in Italian. It is spelled this way, but this one is ghiaccia. Okay, this one is it's not farmacia, it's farmacina. Yeah. So actually, it has it's supposed to have a stress mark like this, but it doesn't have. So these are some exceptions in Italian. The word for jealousy in Italian is not bugia, it's bugia. Yeah. And again, you don't see that. You don't know that it's bugia because you don't know that language. It looks like bugia. Okay. But there are also words that are only one syllable that stresses on the vowels that we don't that we are not used to stressing. Io, mia, sia, tuo, suo, all these. So those are io, mia, sia, tuo, suo. So the stress is actually on the first vowel instead of yo, mia, sia, tuo. Okay, instead of that. So for this case, when you say and it's only one syllable, so you only see one note written for that. For that case, you need to always remember which is the stressed vowel. So if I have mio here for two bits, mio, whatever. Okay. Then for this note, you cannot sing mio pen. You have to sing mio pen. So the stress has to be the longest length. Okay. It also cannot be half and half. It also cannot be mio pen. You cannot separate them into half and half, right? Okay, so this is the thing. And about separating vowel, that comes a second feature in the language. You always find words that ends with a vowel and then having the next word that starts with a vowel. Okay. share and forward. And for this case, how many syllables you actually have? If you count them separately, you have felice forward. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But when they're put together, they're actually 4 syllables. Felice forward. Okay, because in Italian you always have to join them to be 1 syllable. This is from the handle Arias. Stelviame. Okay. And in all these cases, sometimes you have 2 vowels, but sometimes you have more than 2 vowels. Okay, you have 3 or 4, whatever. In all these cases, the vowels cannot, like this, cannot be separated to half and half on the notes. Okay. There's always one important vowel, always. So for these, no question, because the important vowel is on the stressed syllables. For these, they are all unstressed. And for this kind of situations, you follow this hierarchy. So R is always the most important. And then A and O, and then E and U. Okay. So for these, the R will take the length. So if you are still looking at the scores, go back to handle where these are in. You'll find that on the 3rd line of the score, you have stelviame, just like this one, and then you have very, very long note, right? So you have to do stelviame. Now, sometimes the important vowel is the second vowel that you sing, which is something that we are used to doing. But sometimes the important vowel is actually before. Presto in something. Okay. So this one is 1. And O will take the priority because O is before E. Okay. This hierarchy here. So in this case, the O has to be long. Presto. Okay. 4. Just put voice so that it's easier to show. So presto in boy. If the note value is this, yeah. Presto in boy. It's not presto in boy. It's not half and half. It's also not presto in boy because all should be more important than E. Okay. Cool. So this is this. And so when you see, and so even when you see things like, let's just take the Felicianco. Felicianco. This one's joined. 1 note, 1 note, 1 note. Like that. Even when this rhythm is written on top of that, you don't sing Felicianco. You still don't sing that because this is 1 syllable. So and R is more important. So you see, you sing Felicianco. Okay, whatever the note is, Felicianco. You don't sing Felicianco. You still don't debug it when it's okay. You still go to the main vowel first. Right? Good.
So,
Yeah.
wait, then you need to throw your R.
Oh, good question. The only
time you don't roll your R, only time, possibly the other one, but the only time you don't roll your R is when R is between two vowels in one word. So, like faro, faro, okay, you don't roll R. Faro, faro, if you say faro, that means my, I don't know, expensive one. Carro is expensive. Instead of carro, it's my dear, right? And yeah, other than that, resto, you can actually roll. This is actually the other one, maybe one. Resto, sometimes you don't actually need to roll that. But all the other times, when you have an R before a consonant, you roll it. When you have the R at the end of the word, you roll it. You roll it somewhat, okay? Like pharmacia. But it also depends on how fast the text is. The only compulsory roll you need is when it is double. Okay. Well, carro. Okay, those are compulsory, just like all the double consonants that you see in Italian. Okay. All right. Now we're going into the genre we call verismo. Verismo. And this term means realism. Okay, realism. So things that are real. Instead of like a queen turning people into a stone. Yeah, we have the queen, which has relationship problem because the king loves another person, and then the queen is so sad. So the queen also find a princess from the other country and try to kill the other guy or whatever. So, stories that can happen in real life, okay, is very small. And this very small sort of era comes after Verdi. Verdi is kind of like a bridge to very small. And in Verdi's opera, you can still see a very clear structure of numbers. So if you look at a Verdi opera full score, you can still see the content page as number 1, duet, number 2, aria, number 3, whatever. But when you move to very small, you look at the content page, it says X1, X2, X3. That's it. Okay. There is no clear separation of numbers or movements. So at this time, music actually flows very seamlessly from one to the next. You don't actually have that kind of opera where you have recitative and then someone sings an aria. It's not like that, and people are just singing all the time, and then when someone is singing for a really long time, then you know, oh, that one is actually an aria. Okay, that kind of thing. It's also it's true for the aria that you hear later. It's from the very famous, very small composer called Puccini. So what's different at this era in terms of instrumentation? You get more instruments in orchestra. You have heavier texture. It is louder, and composers treat
treat the voice as part of the whole texture. Okay, instead of what we had for the control with all those simple accompaniments, or even in Verdi you still get those kind of accompaniments in Verdi, but up to the real very small, you don't get that kind of thing anymore. Yeah, always the orchestra plays with the voice having counterpoints, having different instruments playing, and what is very special, especially for Puccini, is that when an aria is at a climax, you hear that the orchestra is playing the tune with the singer. It's always like that. You hear that in the very famous one, right? Then the orchestra starts to play. But the orchestra starts to play with the singer until the climax, and always you see this pattern. Well, this won't be a function, but at the climax, a longer note, something like that, something like rhythm. You see this kind of rhythm at the very climax, and what always happens in very small opera is you have this. You won't see that on the score, but people just do that. Vincero is that, okay? If you don't look at the score, you don't actually know that the vincero of the high B is actually this little note. Yeah. In the score, if you follow the rhythm, it's vincero, vincero. This is the rhythm. But in Puccini, in this very small era, vincero, the conductor will naturally do that to hold. The end of another tenor aria where you have a high C in Angelina Manina. La speranza is the rhythm. But again, la speranza. Then the singer sings the high C, then only you go to the next. Okay, so you always find this thing in the climax. Right. So let's keep on Bohème and sorry. Another thing before that. So in very small operas, you don't get clear structures. You get music that keeps on going. And so a question comes when you are performing the aria in isolation. Okay? When you're performing the aria in isolation, where do you start? Okay, first question is where do you start? Second question is where does it can start? Okay, because in the original music, the music just keeps on going like that, and so it is very important for the pianist to know where is an appropriate place to start. When you have those Schirmer arias for candles, arias for soprano kind of books, some of them give you a very good picture, but some of them give you not very good pictures. One that is really bad is Angelina Manina from Bohème, where Rodolfo and Mimi is actually searching for the key, and then he touched her hands, and then the aria starts. Okay, and before that you get the music. But in the anthology, the beginning of the aria is
that is the introduction in the anthology. So when you're singing that, you don't really want the piano to just play one note. It's like this is your starting note and sing. Okay. In O mio Babino Caro, actually begins out of nowhere, right? It begins when the father is opposing her. Then, so in opera is this way. So if the pianist plays that section, the pianist's role will be kind of like the father who opposes. Then you have the reason to start your aria. Okay, that kind of thing. So yeah, here we have Donnellata. What is it talking about?
And then this song is after that we try to break out, we sing like goodbye song to him, and this version like where she could sing or sing.
Yeah. It's kind of like saying the last word kind of thing, right? Go to my room, you can find this, find that. And before she sings this Arias, she says addio. Okay, addio in Italian is not goodbye. Okay, you go to Italy, don't say addio to say goodbye. They'll feel like, oh, you are so weird. Addio means I'll see you at God's place. Farewell. Okay. It's not goodbye. Okay. Goodbye is arrivederci, or just maybe ciao. Ciao actually means hello and also means okay. It's a very good word. The languages that don't have that feels that it's so weird. You have to use one word to say goodbye and hello. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, she said addio before that, so it's something like this when you use that. Okay. Yeah, I don't know which version I sent you guys, but normally in anthologies you just get this introduction. Yeah, but I choose to give a little bit before that, just so that I set up the sort of stage, and set up the emotion for it. So I actually just play the chords first.
operas is those portamento lines that the composers mark. Go to page 215, second line. In volume talk one, there's a line between the two notes. Yeah. So that is the portamento that we talked about when you slide up to a note, you reach the note, and then you sing the real note. Yeah. So instead of so you're reaching that note before you sing that note. It doesn't mean that those are the only place that you can put portamentos. In very small operas, a lot of the style comes from the use of that, right? The use of portamento. So you can do much more than that. Even before so that's the first page. The bottom of the first page, that is also written. Okay, that's fine. You don't normally do a portamento when you have stepwise. Okay, when you have steps. So you don't normally do portamentos for that, unless it is at the very end of the phrase that you want to express something special. The third line of that, okay, you can actually do that, but that's a third down. Okay, it's not a step. Okay, and you also find a lot of retards and then a tempos, retards, a tempo, or when you see col canto in the orchestra. Those are very signature of very small operas. Okay, they have all these markings, and those are the times where you take time and you do things with it emotionally. The one that is very clear is when you mark lento, it says adios and tarancor the first time. It says lento. So really just take time. Yeah, so this is a place where you can do a portamento, although it is just a step. Senza ram. Because it is a very important place at the end of the phrase. Okay. Yeah, good. I think you can use more of this. And the moment is a bit too clean when we hear things like you lose that kind of the passion in singing very small music. Yeah, great, thank you. The next one is if Puccini is not the staple of very small, then the next one is Puccini, the staple of very small. Leoncavallo, who wrote the opera Italiacci, along with another composer called Mascagni, who wrote the opera Cavaliere Rusticana. They are short operas, 1 hour each, and they are always performed together. Sometimes we just say
Caballeros and Payachi. Okay. Masani and Leon Cavallo. Okay, these two are the composers. And and in this area, you might hear something that you don't normally hear in Arias, which is a laughter. Are you going to laugh? Okay, what is this area?
So I'll be singing the role of cameo. So cameo is very protective of his wife, but for any one day, there's a man called Silvio who tried to seduce his wife, and
Silvio's area is so big, by the way.
Okay, and then this guy called Tonio witnessed this seduction. He went and reported to Candio. So Candio was very heartbroken. He rushed back home and confronted his wife. He really wanted to throw the tantrum to his wife, but his friend is it Pepe, right? So Pepe convinced him to not harm his wife, but instead go on with the performance first because he was supposed to perform. So that's when he performed as a clown and putting on makeup.
Yeah. This also ties to this composer, Chilea, who wrote an opera called Adriana the Fugger, who is also it's like a performance in the opera. Okay, she's singing, she's an opera singer, and this one is also it's time to perform, performance in the opera. So yeah, you'll find a lot of that, and yeah, let's listen to it and take note of how the texture of orchestra evolves through the aria. Okay, you can start with the guitar. No,
Just the aria.
Just the aria.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So start at this note.
Yeah.
La 点感。Thank you. Okay, thank you. So one thing that you notice in very small opera is that composers like to give singers a lot of a lot of in a way tension where he where the composers like to write for the singers at a certain textura of the voice and keep singing at that textura. Okay, you find that in this aria. It's all around high G's for the tenor. It is actually very tiring for the tenor to sing. First of all, because it is on what we call the passaggio area, without having notes at a lower range to help to ground things right. And also, second of all, composers like to write this kind of thing when it is also played by orchestra in full force. Okay, you don't see that so much on the paper because the notes are there. It looks like very little notes on the piano, but it's actually a lot of sound for the orchestra. Because when the orchestra plays a chord on the piano, it is like that. But when the orchestra plays a ba, because they can sustain, right? So it will sound something like that kind of sound, yeah, that kind of very full sound. So this is what you always find in very small. Okay. Good. Now we have the last aria, which is Verdi. Going back to Verdi a little bit. Verdi is, as we said, like a bridge to very small. And Verdi wrote a lot of operas and a lot of very famous ones that we always find. Some of his music are relatively light, but some of his music are quite heavy. So the range is pretty wide in his repertoire in terms of how heavy a certain role is or a certain aria is for a particular voice. As we said, we have numbers for various operas, and we always have clear movements of which number is which. And this one is from Il Trovatore, sung by Azucena. What is she really talking about here?
Azucena talking about the priest for revenge against the Count de Luna. Because this person, Count de Luna, was responsible for burning Azucena's mother because he trusted her mother bewitched the Count's brother when the brother was young. And then Azucena avenged for the revenge. She kidnapped the child and apparently killed him. And then, but Count de Luna believes the child may yet be alive and has vowed to find Azucena. This is a theme like gypsy is gathered around.
Mm-hmm. Who is Azucena? What kind of person is she? She a princess?
Gypsy, as I know, she's a gypsy.
What's a gypsy?
A very even,
a very low class person.
Low.
Yeah, when you think gypsy, you don't think being elegant, you don't think obeying the rules. They just do whatever they want. They are in the low class of the class level in citizenship. So
So yeah, and this area is one of the two areas. This one, if you see the score, it's also it's also clear in sections. Yeah, in this area, not like when we were very small, then we don't see clear sections anymore. Here we still see sections, and most of these areas are like that. So you don't see clear sections in in the area. Sometimes you get a section which is slow that goes into a faster section. This one we call Cavatina and Cavaletta. Okay. Cavatina and Cavaletta comes from the Canto time where a singer sings an aria which is slow, Cavatina, and then a fast section, okay, which is the Cavaletta. You find it a lot in the Canto era. Very sometimes used actually. Okay. Yes. And notice one thing, because of text, the two sections actually sound different in terms of articulation. Actually, sorry, not the first verse and second verse, but the first and second line. So just the first page. Stride
we have a short D, right? Because it's only a single D. So that one is kind of like a tenuto effect. So Vamba has two consonants, Vamba, M and P. So that also creates a different articulation. And then la for la, we have a double L. Okay, so that A is slightly different. It's like a martellato for lindomica. Second line starts with corre, so we have a double R. So compare that with stride, there's a different articulation because the first one is stride, the second one is corre. Okay, when fogo, whereas the first one is la vampa. Okay, vampa. So that has because of the difference of text. And then if you keep going, the first one you have so because of the difference of the text, we actually have some very interesting differences in the articulation. So if I'm not singing the text, I'm just hearing, if I don't know the text, but I'm just hearing people sing it, I'll hear this. The first time I'll hear da 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 da. The first time I'll hear this. Second time I'll hear da 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 da. Okay, four, very very short chord. So that is already different if you really look into the text. Yeah. So this is what I mean. The differences that it makes when the text is done this way. Let me try and find. Okay. So we use consonants to express what we want to express, right? And sometimes we can also use the first consonant of the word to express a certain, well, to express that word. Okay. So in this example, it is from La Traviata, Si bella, okay, pura. Okay, she is beautiful and pure. Okay, so this clip that I want to show you is Renee Fleming, the very famous soprano Renee Fleming, working on this section, and she sang this line Si bella pura, but the conductor says pura is actually more important. You know, I think pura is actually more important. See what she did for that.
And just out of nowhere comes this the middle voice that's completely
Sorry.
and in that is a lifetime of pain.
I think you should come off before let the orchestra. In rehearsal, Renee and I worked on this very moment. There's a lot of important words, but the killer is the word pura. So I would save giving emphasis on the word bella and save it for pura, because that's what you ain't, and that's what he's been implying all along. And that's very important, okay? Fabulous.
Tell your daughter this.
So what did she do? She just extended the P of Pura, right? If you know this tool, then you know what to do when either you or if someone tells you, you know, I think this needs to be more expressive instead of just trying to be, you know, just trying to make a gesture or trying to make an expression on the face or what. The very important things that you can find in all the consonants in Italian. This is your time. This one is also just a minute. Joyce Di Donato in a masterclass says, what do you think you should think about when you're performing? Because you cannot be thinking about 500 things at the same time, okay? So she says, think about breath and consonant. And see how she actually demonstrates this when she's demonstrating how to actually sing that part.
Yeah, she's not having it. And that's what you have to show us right from this very beginning. So how do we get that? How do we override this tape in our head that's like, oh God, we had him on, oh God. How do we override that? A little generic. I'm looking for really specific tools that this is technique, it's acting technique and vocal technique. I'm nervous, my hands are sweating, my heart is racing. Where do I go? What do? Breath. Consonants. I know if I start stacking the breath, breathing high, I'm going to be in trouble. So, okay, drop the breath, keep it low, use my consonants, think about the words, know where I am in Elvira's story, not the opera of Giovanni, because there's been 20 centuries of story before this. That's the mindset you need to go into. Okay?
Did you hear? So that again.
Mindset you need to go into.
Yeah, you see how long she was doing. And it's all just using the consonants here. So sometimes we hear that in Italian it's all vowel, just sing vowels, don't sing consonants. It's actually wrong. You go and listen to recordings. Those are the things that they use, okay, for expression. Late tonight, should be tonight. I'll send you a list of singers that you can listen to. Some are older, some are more current, and listen to their expression in Italian, in their Italian repertoire and how they express the text, how they actually use the text for acting, for emotion, because this is special, because Italian ties very closely to an expression of music. That is why we get so much music written based on the Italian language, okay? And that's why Italian culture has come along, that singing is part of it, and opera is just the norm of the culture. Yeah. So
yeah, I hope this gives you a picture of Italian, the language, and also some of its repertoires in operas. So yeah, I hope then you'll be able to know more about how to listen to things when you listen to recordings, and what to actually do when you are singing yourself. Okay. All right. Great. So I'll see you this Friday for the last one-to-one coaching. Yeah, because we only have 3 one-to-one coachings. So let me know what you want to work on, and I'll see you Friday, and then next week we'll do recitative. Yeah. Thank you.